Most people assume boundaries require force, that firmness must sound sharp, that control must look confrontational. This assumption creates the problem. The moment a boundary carries aggression, stability is already compromised. Aggression signals strain, it signals effort, it signals that control is being defended. True boundaries do not defend themselves, they hold. Aggressive responses feel powerful because they release pressure, but release is not control, it is discharge. Once emotion enters tone, the boundary moves outward. Now the interaction is no longer about limits, it becomes about dominance. This is where composure breaks. The Stoic position was precise. They separated firmness from force. A boundary was not something to assert, it was something to operate from. No raised voice, no sharp edges, no emotional emphasis, only position. When boundaries are internal, they do not require volume. They do not require explanation. They do not require escalation. They are felt, not argued. Aggression invites resistance. Calm firmness removes leverage. There is nothing to push against, nothing to provoke, nothing to escalate. If your boundaries often feel tense, the issue is not clarity, it is attachment. You are trying to manage the other person instead of maintaining your position. In the next phase, we will examine what happens when calm firmness meets emotional chaos and how composure is preserved when others begin to lose control. Aggression feels necessary when internal boundaries are unstable. When a boundary is not settled inside, it must be enforced outward. This is the mechanism. Unclear limits create tension. Tension seeks release. Aggression provides it. The mind mistakes this release for strength. It is not. It is compensation. Aggression appears when the mind is unsure whether the boundary will hold, so it adds force. Louder tone, sharper words, stronger posture. These signals are not confidence, they are reinforcement. The interaction shifts. What was a boundary becomes a contest. Now the focus is no longer what will or will not happen. It is who will win. This is how control erodes. Aggression invites response. Response creates escalation. Escalation multiplies variables. The boundary gets lost. The Stoic correction was internal certainty. When a boundary is settled, there is no need to push. You already know what you permit and what you refuse. That certainty removes tension. Without tension, there is nothing to discharge. Calm becomes possible, not because you are suppressing emotion, but because there is nothing unresolved. Aggression fades when decision is complete. This is why calm firmness feels solid. It does not need volume, it does not need repetition, it does not need dominance, it simply stands. In the next phase, we will define what a settled boundary looks like internally and how that internal clarity prevents emotional escalation before it begins. A boundary becomes calm only when it is settled inside, before interaction, before pressure, before emotion rises. Most people decide boundaries in the moment. That is why force appears. The Stoic approach was earlier. They clarified limits when nothing was happening, not what they wanted, what they refused. I do not tolerate raised voices. I do not engage in disrespect. I do not continue conversations that cross this line. These are not threats, they are conclusions. Once a conclusion is reached, there is no tension. Tension exists only when the mind is undecided. Indecision is what produces aggression. When the boundary is settled internally, behavior follows quietly. No emotional load, no performance, no explanation. You are not waiting to see how the other person reacts. You already know what will happen next. This certainty removes urgency. Emotion may still arise, the body may still respond, but action is no longer in question. That is calm firmness. Not because you are suppressing reaction, but because there is nothing left to decide. The mind stops pushing when direction is clear. This is why internal clarity is more important than outward assertion. Once the boundary is settled, others feel it, not through words, through stability. In the next phase, we will apply this settled boundary when emotions escalate around you and show how calm is maintained without resistance when others begin to lose control. Internal boundaries are tested when other people lose control. Voices rise, emotion spills, the atmosphere tightens. This is where calm is often misread as weakness. It is not. Escalation invites synchronization. It pulls for reaction. It pressures you to match intensity. Calm declines that invitation. Application begins with containment. When others escalate, you do not mirror tone. You do not increase speed. You do not enter emotional exchange. You slow, not externally, internally. Posture remains steady. Voice remains level. Attention remains anchored. You do not argue with emotion. You do not correct it mid-surge. You allow it to burn through itself. Escalation feeds on engagement. Without engagement, it loses fuel. This is not indifference, it is discipline. You are not conceding ground, you are refusing chaos. If words are necessary, they are minimal, brief, clear, boundary-based. You state what will or will not continue, then you stop. No justification, no explanation, no emotional residue. The calm boundary does the work. Often, escalation collapses on its own. When it does not, your control still holds. This is how firmness survives without aggression, not by overpowering emotion, but by outlasting it. In the final phase, we will integrate this calm firmness into identity and show how emotional boundaries remain stable across repeated encounters without effort or vigilance. At this stage, boundaries must become identity, not something you manage, something you embody. You are no longer someone who tries to stay calm. You are someone whose calm does not depend on others. Emotion may rise around you, voices may sharpen, situations may destabilize. None of this dictates your state, because your boundary is internal and already settled. This is emotional firmness without aggression. You do not harden, you do not withdraw, you do not perform control, you remain stable. Others may escalate, you do not follow. Others may demand reaction, you do not supply it. This is not passivity, it is authority without display. When boundaries are internalized, calm becomes durable. Not because you suppress emotion, but because behavior is no longer negotiated. You are not deciding in the moment, you are operating from what was already decided. This completes the lesson. Aggression is no longer required to enforce limits. Control is preserved because it is not contested. In the next phase, we will refine this stability further and examine how composure is maintained consistently, even as others around you lose control